Okay, so welcome to the Australian War Memorial. This is what you actually see when you come in through the main doors. This is what's called the commemorative courtyard. On either side you've got the cloisters and the Roll of Honour, marking the names of all Australians who have died in war. And at the end, the dome part of the building, that's called the Hall of Memory, and that's where we have a tomb of an unidentified Australian soldier brought home from a First World War battlefield. So this really is, you know, the heart and soul of the place, and what you don't see here are another 2 levels and also an annex out the back where the actual museum is housed and where we've got all of our objects and artworks. So it is larger than it looks here. So I thought I'd kick off just with a bit of information about myself, a bit of information about the history of the memorial, because it's very important to contextualise this museum, because I think it's quite different in what it does to the museums that you guys come from. So my name is Ron, I work at the War Memorial, and my official title is Manager eBusiness and Retail Projects, which is pretty wafty. It's a wide-ranging role. I serve as a systems administrator for 2 different retail systems, one of which is Piction. I help to develop new products and publications. I write and edit copy for online products and services. I administer publishing contracts, and I maintain a range of reports. I also deal directly with our eBusiness customers, especially for more complex relationships, and by that I mean difficult customers, one of my specialties. I began working at the Memorial in late 2004 as the manager of the on-site shop. I entered my current position about 2 years later, where the diversity of the role has kept me interested and well occupied ever since. I don't get bored in this job. There's so much going on. Before the Memorial, I worked for many years at an independent music store. Back in the days when I had hair and all the rest, I was a bit of an old rocker. And it was one of the first music stores in Australia to actually offer online shopping. And I recall dealing with a lot of very happy American customers too, because we had some pretty rare stuff that wasn't available here. Our on-site and online retail activities are managed within a single self-funded section called Retail and Online Sales. It's the only self-funded section in the Memorial, so we stand or fall based on the business we do. If we don't do enough business, staff go. If we do great business, staff come on. The Memorial shop operates with about 8 full-time and casual staff. The e-sales unit currently has a full-time staff of 5, and there's also the section head. And the section also funds several staff members in other sections whose main work is to produce image, film and sound reproductions for eBiz fulfilment. So moving on to the Memorial itself. The Australian War Memorial, which is in Canberra, the capital of Australia, it's not Sydney, occupies a unique space in Australia's cultural sector. It's much more than its name suggests. It combines a shrine, as we see here, a world-class museum and a research centre with access to an extensive archive. And it was recently rated on TripAdvisor as Australia's #1 tourist destination. Something we're very proud of. So the idea for the War Memorial came from a guy called Charles Bean, who was Australia's official war correspondent during the First World War. He successfully argued for the collecting of relics, records and artworks for a future memorial and museum. And this was, post-World War I. It wasn't until Armistice Day in 1941 that the memorial was officially opened. It took that long to finish. And of course, by that time, the world was at war once again. So of course, the scope of the War Memorial broadened. It now covers Australians who have died in all conflicts, going right back to the Boer War, right through to current conflicts, Afghanistan and such. In 1948, Charles Bean summed up the memorial's purpose with these words: "Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made." And these words are reflected in the memorial's own mission statement: to assist Australians to remember, interpret and understand the Australian experience of war and its enduring impact on Australian society. So we've got some pretty lofty ideals, I guess you'd say. It's also important to know that the memorial falls within the Department of Veterans Affairs. The memorial is a government agency. It's counted as a government department. It's fairly autonomous. It has its own council. It has its own act called the Memorial Act, but it's still subject to the same provisions as any other government organisation, which basically means a layer of bureaucratic red tape on top of everything else that we do, which can be challenging. The memorial is also largely funded by the Australian government, But there's also an expectation that we generate our own revenue, and this is in fact one of our corporate goals. So we generate revenue in a number of ways, but there are some things we don't do. We don't, for instance, charge an admission fee. We don't charge for special exhibitions. We don't even charge for parking. We do, however, charge for a range of goods and services. Long before I joined, maybe going back 20 years, there was a proposal put forward and made public to charge admission to the memorial, and the public outcry was so intense that the idea was quickly dropped, and no one has raised it since. It might get discussed internally from time to time, but it's certainly never gone public again. I don't know what the attitude would be these days. Maybe things have changed, but I suspect certainly amongst the veteran community and returned soldiers, it would be, again, a pretty big deal if we tried to do that, I think. So as with most cultural institutions, the memorial has a bricks and mortar shop located at the main exit. In earlier incarnations, this was essentially just a bookshop specialising in military history. Today, the shop sells books, clothing, souvenirs, and a whole range of merchandise, all still with a military history theme, such as the teddy bears. We sell hundreds, thousands of things like that, and the bears are perennially popular. You'll notice they've all got uniforms on. We've actually worked with the manufacturers of these bears to ensure that the uniforms are historically accurate. Okay, the camouflage is legit. That's the kind of care that we can take with this stuff. We also publish our own books. We've got a couple of publications down below there that are our own. It's not about revenue so much as it is about getting the collection of military history out there. But if at the same time we can have a really popular book, then we earn royalties, and that's another revenue stream for us. So some books, both of these that you can see there, have been very, very successful, sold in the thousands. We make great money out of that. Others not so successful, but it's not the prime driver for getting it out there in the first place. So the shop uses a point of sale system called Advanced Retail, known simply as AR, or when it goes wrong, AR. We use product metadata out of AR to manage our online shop content and our online orders, which takes us to the online shop. And I'm sorry, these are screen grabs, so they kind of vary in quality. Online sales began at the memorial during the early 2000s. The focus was on sales of images, film and sound from the memorial's archives, with a small range of shop products. So it was primarily about getting the collection assets out there and monetising them, making some revenue. The e-commerce system was and still is Piction, although it's changed quite dramatically over the years. Originally, Piction's own templates were used for the online shop, and it was also used for searching the memorial's collection. So it ran the collection search, it ran the shop, did all the back office processing of purchase orders, the workflows, the whole deal. A pretty critical system. In 2010, we made a number of significant changes. We developed a new search facility using the product Solar, and a new online shopping process based on a Zend PHP framework, which gave us greater flexibility for displaying both products and our archival images. Piction's core architecture changed as well, so it was less of an upgrade and more of a re-implementation, and it was a very, very difficult birth. Along with user acceptance testing, my own role was to help configure new business rules and products in Piction. In terms of images, you can currently search between 350, 400,000 images. Behind that, we've probably got digital assets totalling about 3 million. That includes derivatives, images that for whatever reason we don't make available to the public. So the redeveloped shopping and checkout processes utilised Piction APIs or web services, so that Piction became a kind of transactional black box. Piction manages the purchase orders and the subsequent workflows, and provided that the required metadata exists, the system can handle a whole range of goods and services, including merchandise, archival images, subscriptions, memberships and donations. So in short, it's the web services that allow us to present a unified shopping cart. So shop products are arranged by categories, and you can have a single product against as many categories as you like, so you can subcategorise as many times as you like. Archival images. Film and sound recordings, at this point we're only doing that by order form. So for instance, you can search for a film, you can watch it, it's time coded, you can say where the start points and end points are, but you then have to go through this very old world task of filling out an order form. In the future, we would like to make that totally automated so that you can actually you can actually say, okay, start here, stop here. The system then calculates the value, puts it into the shopping basket, and away you go. It's far from impossible, we just haven't done it yet. And subscriptions, memberships, and donations.
5 minutes, Ron.
Ooh, okay. The Memorial's chief collection repository is Mimsy, while digital assets are handled by MediaBin, which is kind of ironic since you're about to get rid of it. Each asset may or may not be available for public consumption, which is often a matter of licensing or copyright. For each asset that is available, specific metadata is extracted from Mimsy on a regular basis and sent to Piction. So shop data is pulled out of AR and sent to Piction, and collection data, same thing. So Piction basically has metadata for everything updated on a regular basis. Every half hour for shop stuff, which is more dynamic, and once every 24 hours for the collection stuff. So these values are then mapped to different products in Piction and built in Piction, which in turn are mapped to business rules and workflows and so on. So for instance, someone buying a book will have one postage charge, and the book will pass into a workflow that's only seen by shop staff and only managed by the shop staff. An image will have a different postal charge or none at all, and then passes into a workflow managed by the multimedia team. Subscriptions, memberships, donations are handled along the same lines. So you can have a combined order where someone orders a book, an image, buys a subscription as well. It all goes through separate workflows to whichever part of the memorial needs to do the processing, and then at the end of the day, it all comes back into eSales for final dispatch and invoicing. Very important for the business that we do. So this is a typical search result, and you can see details of the image and the order a copy button. As soon as you hit that, you're hitting the Zen PHP checkout process and Piction APIs, and from then on, Piction is basically running the shopping cart. This is a composite of two different screens that you'll see. Again, it works, but we'd love to see everything constituted into a single ordering page. Again, it's something we'd like to do, but we haven't done it yet. Given that Piction understands it's dealing with an image, it'll ask you, what are you using it for? If it's personal or reference use, no charge, no worries. If it's for a book cover, something similar, a user fee, a commercial user fee applies and is tacked on to the price of the production cost. So you go through that stage first, and then you can see what products are available. So these are the Piction products which are built in Piction. So for an image, you can have these kinds of products, and there are more than that. That's just a cropped version of it.
So there's a digital only fulfillment side of it. I mean, on the right, it's all physical product, but there's a digital only fulfillment side.
Yeah, you can just buy the image file itself, the digital file, or you can have it presented as a fine art print on a mounted framed canvas print, that sort of thing.
Is there human intervention in the fulfillment of the digital only products, or is it just?
Yes, there still is. The policy we have at the moment, because we see ourselves as custodians of the collection, even if it's available immediately and we can send it to you as a download, an image interpreter will still have a look at the image first. We'll still do a final check to make sure they're happy with it before it goes out. So there is still, but I think we'd like to get to the point where we're using Amazon services, for instance, to just have immediate downloads where there's no kind of user fee implication. That's another thing we'd love to do. So Piction's workflows are obviously critical to managing our orders, and they can pass through several different sections of the memorial, as I've explained. And Piction's various business rules and settings also control discounts, payment methods, postal charges, credit limits, and so on. This is just a quick shot of what a price book item actually looks like in the back end, and you can see there where we control things like price, postage, display, and which workflows are mapped to different products. This is basically what that metadata can look like for the image we saw earlier. You can see the accession number, you can see it's available as mega res, which means you can order practically anything against it. And you can see that Piction understands it's a photo. And that kicks off the various workflows and product formats. So everything is mapped to everything else. General architecture, the Memorial's website has been pushed out to the cloud, hosted at Amazon. We currently use Drupal 7 for managing our website content, with the exception of the Memorial's own content management system for online shop products, where we value add things like descriptions, categories, images, that sort of thing. We'd like to move to Drupal, we haven't quite got there yet. Piction itself is kept behind the Memorial's firewall and uses a VPN to send and receive data from the web. CRM. This represents a challenge and an opportunity. There are a number of reviews underway at the Memorial of our information architecture, website design and the overall digital experience for users, all of which have great implications for how the shop operates and interacts with customers. One idea, and we've talked about this, I think everybody loves the idea of having an overarching CRM, which for us could effectively resolve a whole number of issues, and I'm thinking here particularly of our Razor's Edge database for our memberships. Razor's Edge and Piction don't talk to each other, and that's long been a problem for us. So potentially a CRM solution could resolve this disconnect, and there's also the potential for a single sign-in. Worth noting too that Piction manages our online school bookings system, which involves a separate collection of over 11,000 school profiles. We receive about 130,000 students each year, and many of these school groups book facilitated tours or activities online. Not part of this checkout process because the booking system is just that. We don't take payment up front. Payment happens when they actually arrive. So that's why the two parts are actually kept quite different. They're handled by different teams and they have very different business rules. Going forward, there has been a discussion about charging up front, in which case we'd probably be looking at trying to bring the booking site into the eBusiness checkout process, and that could get really interesting, although I think it can be done. And for context, we get about 840,000 visitors passing through the Memorial's main doors each year, on top of the 130,000 students. Okay. I'll skip that since we're short of time. Challenges and opportunities. Despite the Memorial's iconic status, at the end of the day, the images and other collection material that we offer represent a niche product. It's a specialty product. So you can order over 300, 400,000 images, but it's effectively a library with a broad single theme, which is military history. This works both ways. If a publisher or a producer needs material about Australian military history, our archives are a natural starting point. As well, we have sensitivities around our archival material. It's fair to say that the Memorial sees itself as a custodian, and many of our stakeholders have this same expectation of us. If we sell an image that's then used in a way that someone deems inappropriate or historically inaccurate, it's not unusual for the Memorial to be held responsible rather than the customer or the business who purchased and then used the image. And this happens probably too often. Most importantly, the Memorial can't be seen to be glorifying or commercialising war. So for the online shop, this means being careful and conservative with our choice of words when we're describing a product and choosing those products carefully in the first place. Another tension we have is the monetising of our archival material versus the dissemination of military history information, which is a critical part of our mission. On the one hand, we want people to explore and use the collection. On the other, we want to retain a measure of control over how the content's used, and we charge for high resolution materials, and we also charge for commercial user fees. So it's important that we remind our stakeholders that the charges we apply, the money we make, directly benefits the Memorial and helps fund its activities, which is true. As well, we have a waiver process for individuals and groups who want to use our material for commemorative purposes. The other thing I'd say is that our sales, both of products and collection material, are somewhat dependent on what's happening beyond the Memorial and outside of its control. So 2014-15 was one of our busiest periods ever, around 2.2 million through the shop tills, 1.6 million through eBusiness. And this was largely due to a significant centenary, the 100th anniversary of the 1915 Gallipoli campaign, which is a milestone in Australian military history. We're still in that 2014-18 centenary of the First World War, but this year is a little quieter for us in terms of revenue because there simply aren't as many books being published and there aren't as many documentaries being produced. And that affects what we get in orders. The other thing which we sometimes have to remind ourselves of is that our section and what we do is just one part of a greater whole, and it's one part of a much, much greater mission. So we're always trying to think of new sources of revenue. I'll leave you with the idea of using photographs and artworks for interior design, which is something we're starting to explore. We'd like to add a page promoting theme-based images suitable for designers, drawing on archival photographs and artworks. These chairs were actually made and are currently being used in our on-site cafes, and they're using our recruiting posters, home front and recruiting posters from the Second World War, and poppy artwork, which is a very, very popular theme. The memorial's also invested in a small film studio with green screen chroma key technology, and we envisage using this technology to help market our images to designers and architects. And another potential avenue is to use the green screen for virtual tours, ideally for school groups that can't visit the memorial, remote communities, things like that. So I'll leave it there and open it up for questions if anybody's got any.
Thank you.
Okay.